Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from a UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Now today let us discuss the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 1st July 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on the screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our examination perspective. Now for this week answer writing assignment from DNS videos, this is your question. It says one nation one ration card is a potential game changer as it empowers the poor. Analyze. You have to answer this question in 250 words and submit your answer on the eLearn platform. Now practicing these answers are very important as it helps you in developing the proper answer writing skills, and you can also take the feedback from the evaluation team. So the question for this week is with respect to one nation one ration card. Now let's take up our first news for discussion appearing on page number 7 as an interview of Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was one of the key member of erstwhile Planning Commission of India and who also played a significant role with respect to the liberalization which took place post 1991. So the headline says that India's 1991 liberalization leap and lessons for today. The reforms were hugely successful, but a lot remains to be done, says one of the architects of the transition period. So from our examination perspective, let's try to understand these aspects which has been discussed in this interview. These aspects pertains to situations prior to liberalization, particularly with respect to the aspect of control system which existed in Indian economy. This interview also mentions about a M document prepared by Montek Singh Ahluwalia, which was one of the first document which provided for an idea of liberalization, especially with respect to industrial and trade policy reforms. Then this article mentions about trade liberalization of 1991 and various kinds of political and commercial oppositions. Next, the article mentions about the transition from lowering of import duties to its present rise. Further, the interview also mentions about need to revisit India's current stand on RCEP, employment scenario post-lockdown, and also what should be the priorities of the government with respect to going ahead post the economic slowdown. So let's go through these important highlights of this interview one by one. Now this interview has given us a glimpse of the situation which existed prior to liberalization which took place in 1991. The first point mentioned here is the aspect of control system which existed in the private sector. And this aspect of control system restricted private entrepreneurship, especially in areas which were critical for development. So these areas critical for development was only allowed for the public sector or the government sector, and no participation was allowed by the private sector. Next article says that certain sectors in the economy were only reserved for the public sector despite their uncompetitive approach. Here Montek Singh Ahluwalia highlights that despite the lackluster approach of the public sector enterprises, still private sector was not allowed in such areas. And in certain areas or sectors where private sector was allowed was based on industrial license, which was very hard to procure for industrial houses. So overall, there was a situation where doing business was extremely difficult. Further, the interview says that certain items having export potential were prohibited from exports. So these goods which could have been exported were prohibited from export, or rather were reserved exclusively for small scale enterprises or for small scale producers. Now all these aspects cumulatively reduced competition in Indian economy. Now on the aspect of competition, the domestic producers faced no competition in the market since consumer goods could not be imported. And this overall saved the domestic producers from outright competition from foreign markets. However, with respect to importing capital goods, it was allowed but based on an import license. An import license was only given on government satisfaction that the import was essential and domestic substitutes were not available. So even import license for capital goods were given based on the unavailability of alternatives in the domestic sector. And lastly, import technology was controlled and FDI, that is foreign direct investment, was overall discouraged by the government. So broadly, these were the conditions prior to liberalization which took place in 1991. So based on these domestic conditions in the market or economy, the M document was proposed by Montek Singh Ahluwalia, which provided for an integrated strategy for reform with respect to fiscal policy of India, industrial policy, trade policy, and also exchange rate policy. And this document largely was also supported by Dr. Manmohan Singh. So the question remains as to what led to the 1991 reforms. That is, what was the condition of the Indian economy which actually led the government to take this particular decision? So the first point highlighted here is with respect to the aspect of increased government expenditure along with decreased revenue. Now, since the competition in the economy was largely restricted among domestic sector, hence there was less competition, and this also resulted in less revenue for the government. Another reason was that large share of the income of the government was invested in certain areas which did not provide immediate returns to the government, such as the social sector and defense. So there was a need to utilize the rest of the revenue of the government in a highly efficient manner. And even the income from the public sector undertakings was not very encouraging to meet the growing expenditure of the government of India. At times, there was also a situation that even India's foreign exchange, which was borrowed from other countries and international financial institutions, was spent on meeting consumption demands or consumption needs of the economy. And also the fact that there were certain developmental policies which was pursued by the government in the past also resulted in decreased government earnings, as the development policies required that even though the revenues was very low, the government had to overshoot their revenue to meet the challenges of unemployment, poverty, and also population explosion. And as already stated, that the government was not able to generate sufficient amount of income from internal sources such as taxation. Now all these situations cumulatively led to a situation where government expenditure was much greater as compared to the government of India's earnings. And because of this, borrowings for the government became unsustainable as it led to increase in prices, that is inflation in the economy. This resulted in high rate of import and also led to decline in foreign exchange reserves for the government. Now, as you already know that the foreign exchange reserves declined to such a level that was not adequate to finance imports for more than 2 weeks. And also paying interest on the borrowings from international institutions became difficult for the government. And seeing India's situation, no country or international institution was willing to lend India on reasonable terms. Now, because of these situations, Government of India approached the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that is IBRD, and also IMF, that is International Monetary Fund. And here, India received $7 billion as loan to manage its financial crisis. However, the agencies provided a condition for India to take the loan with respect to $7 billion. These conditions were India had to liberalize and open up the economy by removing restrictions on the private sector, by reducing the role of government in many areas, and also removing trade restriction or barriers with respect to India and other countries. So these conditions were put by IMF and IBRD so that India could take loan of $7 billion to manage its crisis. And based on the condition, Government of India announced the new economic policy, which provided for wide range of economic reforms. It aimed to improve competition in the Indian economy and also provided for removal of certain barriers to trade between India and other countries. So overall, the purpose of new economic policy introduced in 1991 was to maintain sufficient foreign exchange reserves, keep inflation under control, improving efficiency of the economy, and also increase international competitiveness by removing trade barriers. And this new economic policy of 1991 was introduced when P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister and Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Finance Minister of India. Now, after understanding about the purpose for which the reforms were initiated, let's go through some of the important measures which was taken as a part of 1991 reforms. Now, the 1991 reforms deregulated the industrial sector, and this resulted in cancelling of industrial license for most of the sectors or for most of the categories apart from certain products. Further, this also led to financial sector reforms which eventually led to establishment of the private sector banks in India. And further, even FDI, that is foreign direct investment, was increased in the banking sector to 74%. Further, these reforms also introduced the foreign institutional investors such as merchant bankers, mutual funds, etc. And these foreign institutional investors were allowed to invest in the Indian financial market. Now, the part of the reforms also included tax reforms, as the government not only reduced income tax but also corporation tax or corporate tax. Now, the government also introduced foreign exchange reforms, whereby the government devalued Indian rupees against foreign currency. And Indian rupees was devalued as an immediate step or measure to resolve the balance of payment crisis. Further, the reforms also freed determination of value of rupee in foreign exchange market from government control, as markets were allowed to determine exchange rates based on demand and supply of foreign exchange. And with respect to trade and investment policy reforms, government dismantled quantitative restrictions both on import as well as export. Further, the government also reduced tariff rates, and overall the government also removed licensing procedure for imports. So these can be said to be some of the measures which were introduced through the 1991 reforms and also thereafter. Now, moving further with respect to other parts of the interview, this interview highlights that this economic reform of 1991 saw opposition from the leftist parties, the rightist parties, and also from the business class. The leftist group opposed these reforms as it allowed for foreign direct investment in various of Indian sectors. The rightist group opposed these reforms as against nationalist agenda, and the business class feared competition from the foreign markets. So overall, there was certain kind of opposition with respect to these reforms introduced in 1991. The next important aspect which has been taken up in this interview is with respect to lowering of tariffs. As you can see that in 1992, the import duty was as high as 57.5%, whereas in 2008, it has been reduced to a mere 8.9%. However, the interview has supported for an average import duty to be somewhere around 7%, as this was also supported by former vice chairman of Niti Aayog. Now, this interview highlights that there has been a trend of increasing import duty across the world because of the concept of protectionism, as countries are increasing the import duty to make the imported items less competitive as compared to the domestic products. So in this regard, the interview mentions that the government should look into the aspect of maintaining an average import duty somewhere around 7%, as increased import duty hampers India's ambition to become part of global supply chain. Increased import duty also make goods expensive compared to similar domestic products, and therefore it reduces the demand of such imported products. Further, increased import duty also raises the cost of doing business for the exporter countries, and overall it hampers competition in the market as it reduces demand for the imported goods. Further, the interview also mentions that increasing import duty is not a solution to counter imports from China. And here he said that India should rather support reducing tariffs as a part of RCEP, that is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, RCEP aims to progressively lower tariffs in the region, counter protectionism, boost investment in the area, and also allow freer movement of goods in the region. However, India feared that becoming part of RCEP, it would have to reduce its import duties and also accompanied by easier service and investment rules to allow freer movement of goods in the region. Now, Indian industry was very apprehensive of joining RCEP as they feared competition from foreign goods, and especially from imported goods from China. And it is here where Montek Singh Ahluwalia has said that increasing import duty is not a solution to counter increasing imports from China. Rather, India can impose anti-dumping duty on China. So here Montek Singh Ahluwalia has supported that India must join RCEP as it will help India to become a major player in non-China dominated supply chains. Now here the article says that India cannot replace China. However, it can become a major player in the non-China dominated supply chains as India will be helped by RCEP members and also the rules with respect to allowing freer movement of goods in the region. So overall, this article highlights that increasing import duty continuously is not a final solution. Now moving further to the other aspect highlighted in this article is with respect to the aspect of employment, especially post-lockdown. Now this article says that employment in agriculture continued to decline and even the non-agricultural employment grew slowly in India. So both these cumulatively has contracted employment in India. Now this problem of less employment or contracted employment is also aggravated by contraction of GDP by 7.3% in 2020-21 as this also impacted employment. So one of the challenge highlighted here is for Government of India to get economy to pre-pandemic growth rate at around 4 to 5%. So overall, Montek Singh Ahluwalia has suggested that there is a need for policy to ensure higher growth as this will ultimately lead to higher employment in the market which will overall help in reducing poverty in India. So overall we need to grow at around 7 to 8% of GDP to make progress on poverty reduction as it will help in providing jobs to the unemployed in the Indian economy. Thus these are some of the important highlights of this particular interview appearing on page number 7. Now this article becomes important both from our prelims and mains point of view. In the prelims, this topic gets covered under current events of international importance along with economic and social development along with sustainable development. Whereas in the mains, question can be asked under GS paper 3 with respect to Indian economy and its issues and also effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy and their effects on industrial growth. And in GS paper 2, questions can be asked under international relations with respect to bilateral, regional or global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest. Further, this topic of RCEP has been comprehensively dealt by Mangal sir in the DNS dated 15th April 2021. So in this discussion dated 15th April 2021, Mangal sir has in detail discussed about implications of India withdrawing from RCEP. So after going through this particular interview provided under page number 7, let's take up the next article for discussion. Now the next news to be discussed appears on page number 8. It says, Centre's Digital Agri proposal raise concerns. 91 groups send feedback to the government. And this feedback is with respect to this consultation paper on IDEA, which has been published by Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmer Welfare under the Government of India. Now the term IDEA here refers to India Digital Ecosystem for Agriculture and has been published by Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmer Welfare. Now this IDEA vision documents released by the government reflects medium and long-term outcomes which is sought to be attained by this IDEA initiative for the Indian farmers. So it says the vision is to build a national digital agriculture ecosystem to elevate Indian agriculture sector to higher levels of efficiency and productivity and also to improve the welfare and income of farmers. So basically it highlights 3 important aspects here. First is with respect to elevating Indian agriculture sector to higher levels of efficiency. So it talks about efficiency in the agricultural sector, thereby improving productivity of agricultural sector and overall improving the welfare and income of Indian farmers. So this is what it aims to achieve through a medium term and a long term proposal. So on this note, let's go through the objectives as highlighted in this IDEA paper. So the first objective highlighted is with respect to enabling the farmer to realize higher income and better profitability through access to right to information at the right time and from innovative services. So in order to realize higher income and better profitability, the objective of IDEA highlights about the importance of access to information. It further says to enable better planning and execution of policies, programs, and schemes of the central and state governments, and also of the private sector and farmers producer organizations. Next, it is mentioning about enhancing efficiencies with respect to using or utilization of various resources which are needed by the farmers, such as land, water, seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, including farm mechanization. And here again, this easy access is again linked to the aspect of easier access to information. Now here it mentions about providing location specific and personalized extension services across agriculture life cycle, however with simultaneous protection of privacy of personal data. So two aspects has been mentioned here. One is with respect to providing location specific details along with the promise of data protection. It then mentions about building capacities across the gamut of digital agriculture and precision agriculture. It then mentions about adoption of certain standards for interoperability and seamless exchange of information across the agricultural digital ecosystem. So here it is mentioning about seamless exchange of important data, especially with respect to Indian agriculture. However, it also highlights about ensuring digital rights are properly managed. So here, with respect to exchange of these seamless data, it's also mentioning about ensuring digital rights. And the use of these high quality data will further enhance research and development as well as innovations in the field of agriculture. Now, the IDEA paper also talks about cooperative federalism by working along with states and union territories for the realization of the vision of IDEA. And lastly, it mentions about formulating and leveraging PPP framework, that is public-private partnership framework, for realizing the power of the digital. So a lot of emphasis has been provided or given on exchange of data pertaining to Indian agriculture and also use of such data in order to enhance cooperative federalism by working along with states and union territories. Now this document also mentions about providing a unique farmer ID to every farmer, which will be a unique random number. Now this UFID will be assigned to every farmer based on their demographic details, which will be matched along with Aadhaar and their mobile phone number. Now concerns have also been raised on this aspect of unique farmer ID. Now another building block on which concerns have been raised is with respect to consent manager. It says that this consent manager will be developed to comply with the consent requirement under privacy laws. The point to be noted here is that so far Government of India has not legislated data privacy law in India. It highlights that this critical manager will be critical for ensuring that all projects relating to data sharing comply with the applicable regulations, and it will be well established through its extensive use in DigiLocker. So after going through these important highlights about the IDEA paper, let's go through the grounds of concerns which has been expressed in this article. So it says that concerns have been raised on issues of exploitation of farmers, data protection and the aspect of consent, mismanaged land records, exclusion of landless cultivators, and also corporatization of agriculture. Further, the group has also highlighted that there is no farmer representation in the task force which brought out the proposal of IDEA or in the governance framework of IDEA. So this entire consultation paper on IDEA was released without any farmers representation. So this is also another ground for concern. Now the organization did accept that it was important to bring the benefits of digital technology to farmers, but they also emphasized that such digital infrastructure should be owned by the government and not by the private sector or private corporates. So the farmer group fears that the entire data management will be given to the private sector, which they can further misutilize for their commercial gains. So it is in this regard this group suggested that this alleged model is more focused on using government's existing database and also geared towards corporate revenue models rather than ensuring farmers' needs and interest. So that is why the group is concerned with respect to corporatization of Indian agriculture, as the entire system, according to the Farmers Association, is based on revenue models. Further, the farmers organization also highlighted the concern with respect to flawed condition or usage of digitized land records and their holdings. And also concerns were raised with respect to failure of this digitized land record system to capture the information of actual cultivators and those who are operating the land. So here the group has highlighted that the proposition of a farmer's database based on digitized land records will lead to problems and exclusion for farmers. So these are some of the concerns which has been highlighted in this particular article. Now this news on idea paper on Indian agriculture becomes important from your prelims and mains perspective, as questions in your prelims can be asked with respect to Indian economy pertaining to Indian agriculture, and in the mains question can be asked under GS paper 3, especially with respect to issues pertaining to Indian economy, especially regarding Indian agriculture, and also with respect to e-technology in the aid of farmers. So after this discussion on India digital ecosystem of agriculture, let's take up our next article. Now this news appears on page number 13 and should be seen primarily from your prelims perspective. It says non-food bank credit growth eases to 5.9% as per the RBI data. It also says that industrial and services loan demand slows. Now RBI has released a monthly data, namely sectoral deployment of bank credit, and this data is released by RBI every month. So according to this data of RBI, non-food bank credit growth stood at 5.9% in May 2021 as compared to 6.1% in May 2020. Now important point to be noted here is that according to RBI's classification, the loans provided by the scheduled commercial banks are categorized into food and non-food credit, where non-food credit includes loans provided for agriculture and allied sectors, industries, services and personal loans. Whereas under the sector of food credit, loans are provided by the scheduled commercial banks to the Food Corporation of India and other agencies involved in the procurement of food grains. Now usually these food credit loans are repaid as when the central government releases the subsidy amount to these procurement agencies. Another important point to be noted here is that major chunk of scheduled commercial banks credit is in the form of non-food credit as per RBI data, which is as high as 90%, while only a small share of scheduled commercial banks loan is for the food credit. So in this news, you need to know about the differentiation between food and non-food credit, and majority of the loan are provided under the category of non-food credit, which also includes loans provided for purposes such as agriculture, allied sectors, industries, services and personal loans. Now lastly, let's take up this news from the archive section appearing on page number 7. It talks about women's suffrage. It says that the fact of enfranchisement of women of the Madras Presidency has now become known to the world, and messages of congratulation are coming in, many of them being received by Women's Indian Association. So from your examination perspective, you need to know about Women's Indian Association and its close link for fighting for women's voting rights. It says that the Women's Indian Association was founded on 7th May 1917 by women's rights activists such as Annie Besant, Margaret Cousins, Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy, Sister Subba Lakshmi and Sarojini Naidu, and these were collectively referred as Daughters of India. Now apart from fighting for women's voting rights, this association also battled against the social evils like child marriage and actively campaigned for voting rights for women. Now this piece of information also highlights about Lady Constance Lytton, who for many years did the most splendid work in England for the enfranchisement of women of that country and devoted herself absolutely to the cause of freedom and progress of women. Now another important fact from my examination perspective is that in 1917, the Montague-Chelmsford Commission was touring India in preparation for drawing up a set of constitutional reforms, and the delegates of the association met the members of the commission and argued that women be given the right to vote. However, the Montague-Chelmsford Commission rejected their demands, but the Women's Indian Association did not give up their demand and they continued fighting for equal rights for women. Now they also approached another commission, namely Southborough Commission in 1918, which visited India to review the question of franchisee among other things. However, despite the request made by Women Indian Association, the Southborough Commission did not accept Women's Indian Association proposal with respect to providing franchisee rights to the women. So these are some of the important facts which you need to know with respect to Women's Indian Association, as questions can be asked with respect to Indian freedom movement in your prelims examination. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. So, the question is, which among the following are included in the category of food credit by RBI? Options are: first, loans to the agriculture and allied sector; second, loans to FCI for procurement of food grains; third, loans for food processing industries. So, here the question is, select the correct answer using the code given below. So, options are A, 1 only; B, 1 and 2 only; C, 2 only; and D, 1, 2 and 3. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements with respect to One Nation, One Ration Card scheme. Options were: first, it's a national level portable ration card scheme only for migrant workers. No, this is incorrect. Second, it would be implemented under National Food Security Act. Yes, this is correct. Third, ration would be provided only to the eldest member of the family. No, this is again incorrect. So here the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So here the correct answer becomes B, that is 2 only. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you for watching DNS.